But we expressed Premier League as one of the main interested for this
Oh, yeah.
player. And the Premier League has elite managers. In terms of managers, I think it's no doubt that they have the best managers in the world as a pool of managers. But the most well-paid manager, I think, is still Simeone in La Liga with Atletico.
Yes.
That is quite sus. I just want to say that because he's not the best manager in the world. The best manager in the world is our number one in this list. And if you know, comment down below the number one of the top 5 ranking of the best managers in the Premier League. But again, interesting, Breton. Who is your number 5? Because it can be very controversial. This is controversial territory.
There are so many honorable mentions. I mean, the 5th place, let's be honest, is the toughest place because there's a couple legends here for the most part, and there's a couple kind of wannabe legends. And I top 5 Premier League managers, the 5th, this is where it's at. So I'm going to start with maybe somebody that seems a little controversial to be in 5th. I don't know. But I'm going to say Erik ten Hag. I'm going to say Erik ten Hag. And listen, I believe... should a man who took until this past week to finally strip the captaincy from Harry Maguire be any higher than 5th at this moment? Probably not. Should he even be in the top 5? I don't know, because it's still small sample size. But there's no doubt that Erik ten Hag, they won a trophy.
Yeah.
Erik ten Hag has made some very, very tough decisions. Whether or not they're right, I don't know. They have gotten blown out, but at the same time, they have played relatively decent football with a little bit of consistency near the end of the season. And there's a lot pointing in the right direction for Manchester United and wanting to become, quote unquote, the best transition players, in the Premier League. And I am here for that. And you know what I'm also here for when it comes to Erik ten Hag is I'm here for fostering a part of Manchester United that has kind of been stripped away. And I think Gary Neville, believe it or not, here I am agreeing with Gary Neville, saying it best, but he would know that hard-nosed approach, that, fight, run all over the field, never stop, kind of hard-hitting. He has brought that back. Ten Hag has a reason. It's just small sample size does not get him any higher. And there's so many other guys that could be here that my honorable mention section is going to be a lot bigger. So 5th place for me is Ten Hag.
You said a lot, Breton, and I disagree with a lot that you said. And I'm going to say why, because I have him 4th. I do see him higher up because the manager I have in my number 5 is Unai Emery. I have to put Unai Emery in the top 5 list of Premier League managers because this man won 3 Europa Leagues in a row with Sevilla. That is unbelievable. And at Aston Villa, he convinces a free agent, Otelema. He convinces a Pau Torres. He improves massively in Ollie Watkins. Jacob Ramsey is an elite wonder kid with him. So I had to put Unai Emery in my top 5. And I have huge subs. I don't have De Zerbi in my top 5 list. And I know he got Europa League football with Brighton, but I do think the management at the board at the top of Brighton is elite too. And Aston Villa, before Unai Emery with Stevie G, that was a pure mess. Unai Emery was the huge variable that fixed it all. So I wanted to give credit to that.
If we're going to talk about Villarreal or Almeria or anyone else, we also have to talk about his last stint with Arsenal, which did not exactly end incredibly well. So that's where kind of my limitation was. And when it comes to it, I completely agree. I mean, we'll see how much of this was new manager bump when it comes down to it, but it's certainly, with Unai Emery, has helped with his recruitment. And he has convinced Aston Villa to continue to spend for him. So much so that they might have just won a bidding war for Moussa Diaby for over 50 million. But and he's assembled. We've already talked about it in the past. He's assembled one hell of a squad. So my only reason, I guess, not putting him in there was that his sample size so far with Villa, I guess, Premier League centric, was so much smaller. Believe it or not, my fight was whether or not to put a guy like Thomas Frank in there, who, let's be honest, does not have the same. Okay, what I'm trying to say is he has taken a club. I know he has taken a club and he has made it so much better. But there's a cap on Brentford.
Yes.
So anyway, 5th place for me, I got it. 5th place for you is Unai Emery. Fifth place for me is Erik ten Hag, and you've got ten Hag in fourth.
I have ten Hag in fourth.
So why do you feel ten Hag is above Emery?
I feel he's above Emery because at Man United, he convinced a player like Casemiro at Man United. He managed to win a League Cup, a cup that I think Man United hadn't won anything in 5 years. Erik ten Hag immediately wins something, and he wins Champions League too, which manages to convince a higher level players for this transfer window too. So I think in all these cases, to convince Onana, a finalist in the Champions League, that ain't easy. And Onana is convinced by Erik ten Hag because he was coached by him. He knows the potential of Man United. And a Man United team that wins the Premier League, you're immediately in the history books and recorded forever. And that's when Onana and Erik ten Hag and Lisandro Martinez, Varane, Casemiro, all of them, they believe will happen at Man United too. But they need Garnacho, Sancho, a striker like Rasmus Winter-Holland to step up big time for make that happen. So that is my number 4. Erik ten Hag. But I want to know yours.
It is interesting. Oh, yeah. I'll give you my number 4, but I am interested that you have Erik ten Hag at 4th. I mean, that means you rate even the slightest bit
2 rebuilds
in his handling of the Cristiano Ronaldo situation, though. But he also just named Bruno Fernandes captain. Do you think that's the right move?
It's the right choice.
That's the right choice.
Bruno Fernandes, if he didn't have the captaincy ban, he would be moving on the pitch as a captain because that's what he does best. And Bruno Fernandes has improved massively with Erik ten Hag, in my point of view. Yeah. So I think it was the right choice. But who's your number 4?
All right.
And people, tell us your number 5 and 4 in the comments. We want to see.
Yes, please. But my number 4, and I'll keep this quicker, is Eddie Howe. Number 4, Eddie Howe. Okay. I have one limitation for Eddie Howe, but I am going to say it right now. He did wonders, so much so that he might even deserve to be maybe above this. He did wonders last season with a club that has not even stretched wholly the financial muscle that they could stretch. Now, that in and of itself, I think, is an issue because I don't know if Eddie Howe has any part in the recruitment, but it does seem weird that in a period of excess right now, we're spending. They have not yet landed, but they got Tonali. I got it. But to do what he did last season with their defense is infinitely more impressive to me than what Pep Guardiola did with Manchester City's defense, John Stones in particular and all that. But they are the best in the league, pound for pound. You had Dan Burn in that lineup, okay? You had Fabian Schär, for the most part, that we see him as wildly underrated, but nobody ever talked about him previous to this season.
I agree.
For Eddie Howe to be able to do that, pound for pound, euro for euro, whatever you want to call it, impressive. The Joe Linton switcheroo, Isak starting to come out of his shell, Miguel Almiron being one of the top scorers in the Premier League is just unheard of in most of our minds. We all thought most of these guys were castaways. So I'm really interested to see what Eddie Howe, now he didn't win a trophy, but what Eddie Howe can do in the future and whether or not Newcastle can continue to get what has been limited shows of financial force, what they can do to continue to build around Eddie Howe and whether or not there's a ceiling on Eddie Howe and his development on the club. So that's why he's 4.
So Eddie Howe, I didn't put him in my top 5, and I agree with you. I think it can be seen as disrespectful, and I understand that. And my big reasoning with this is it was a great achievement for Newcastle to get top 4 in the Champions League. But I cannot imagine the variables behind the closed doors, that the objectives that these players get by just getting Champions League football itself. I do think that Eddie Howe is a huge factor for the success of Newcastle, but I can't discount the money factor too. And there's a huge accomplishment, huge objectives that these players get if they get to these objectives during the season. I'm sorry. So I agree. But I just wanted to say it was a hard one not to put him in my top 5. But
every one of the people above this, except maybe Klopp, Guardiola and Arteta have spent much more than Newcastle has so far.
Yes, I agree too.
Arteta in particular. So okay, I hear it. Eddie Howe. But yeah, that's tough. So who's your 3?
I put Erik ten Hag and Unai Emery ahead of Eddie Howe because I've seen Unai Emery winning 3 Europa Leagues in a row, and I've seen Erik ten Hag having deep runs in the Champions League twice with 2 different teams of Ajax, and still succeeding and getting Eredivisie titles too. So my only doubt is the winning.
I didn't fully understand the assignment then, because I didn't know we were going that deep in terms of caliber, in terms of the past, setting him up for the future.
Manager. So just top 5 manager.
If that's the case, then Eddie Howe at Bournemouth was not exactly lighting everybody's world on fire.
And we don't have Pochettino
for that.
We do not have Pochettino in this top 5 because I don't have Pochettino because he didn't show that he could win a trophy at Tottenham, and I do believe he did an amazing job in terms of a rebuild, amazing job in terms of a rebuild too at Southampton, but there was given moments that you would expect more at PSG and at Tottenham too. So I just wanted
Southampton was awesome. Southampton was amazing. That was the best. Yeah, Pochettino. I'm really interested to see what he'll do with Chelsea. But who's your 3? I got it now.
My 3 is Arteta, and I had a bit of a 2 and 3 discussion between myself making this decision, but I just believe Arteta, this is the season that we're going to have confirmations. It's the 4th season at Arsenal. Everybody is expecting the right results to come, and look, he has a unique style. He has a unique style, and I think Arteta, to convince a player like Declan Rice to join the team this summer shows that he is a top world-class manager. I know he still hasn't won a big trophy. He got an FA Cup immediately with the group of players that he didn't like. So let's see with a strong core, if he can go against Pep Guardiola. That is the huge boogeyman. And Arteta is one of the managers in the world that can beat Guardiola. I believe. Xavi, I believe a manager like Ancelotti can have that surprise factor. And Klopp and Arteta. So let's see. So I had to put it.
Yeah, I mean it's that vicious circle of the protege finally, beating the teacher, if you will. So I'm with you. I got Mikel Arteta in 3rd as well. The only thing I will add to that, because you said it well. The only thing I'm going to add to that is I am always going to be here for his type of coaching leadership. He's kind of sappy. He's almost like movie oriented in that sense, like, doing the funny drawings and trying to literally get to the core of every human being, not just player, but every human being that plays for him. I am here for that every day of the week. Okay. Because it's something you can always get in the corner of. And does that win trophies in the future? I don't know, but he is convinced, and normally insanely stingy, ownership group. He has convinced the front office. He has convinced everybody, or back office. He's convinced everybody at Arsenal that he is the man that can lead them into hopefully lifting the Premier League trophy at some point in the future, and who knows beyond that. So, like you said, recruitment, all that good stuff. I am here mostly for that core feeling of what Mikel Arteta brings to the game. And we have to remember that what he has accomplished so far has been with one of the youngest, if not the youngest, squad in the Premier League. And that squad, believe it or not, has also gotten younger.
It's true.
With the sale of Granit Xhaka to Bayer Leverkusen. So I have Arteta in 3rd as well. And I am excited to see what the next phase of this project brings.
Arsenal have a great style of play. We can see that. Yep. And then they have the extensions for the future, a core for the future with Saliba, Saka, Martinelli, all extending their contracts. We have to give credit to Arteta because he's the man that is managing to make that happen. And congratulations to Edu, that is the decision making behind everything with all this. And that duo of Edu and Arteta, if they win the Premier League, they will be credited the right way too. So our top 2.
I think I know your 2.
No surprise. Yeah. I think it's no surprise. So Klopp, we agree. Klopp is the 2nd best manager in the Premier League. My way of seeing it, he's the only one to win a Premier League against Pep Guardiola in his last 6 years in the Premier League. And Klopp did it with a core of players and with a cheaper team than Man City too. So we saw a midfield with Fabinho, Henderson, and Wijnaldum going against every top team in Europe. They won a Champions League. That is immense. And just look how Sadio Mane is right now. I do believe Sadio Mane is a world-class player. I really do believe that in the right system. But since he left Liverpool, it doesn't seem like that was the best choice for him. So I do think it was inevitable because Liverpool couldn't pay all the salaries for all the top strikers they have. But still, it just shows levels and how. And Wijnaldum too. He's not doing better than when he leaves. And look at Henderson. They might be leaving to Saudi Arabia. But that's another talk. But I do believe that Jurgen Klopp is the second best manager. But if Arteta wins the Premier League this season, I put Arteta in the number 2 position of best managers in the Premier League, ahead of Jurgen Klopp, if he wins the Premier League. Just want to say.
Fair enough. Well, once again, I mean, you're not going to get any disagreement here for what you've said, sadly. I know that doesn't make for a great podcast, us disagreeing with each other all the time. But listen, Jurgen Klopp, he's a squad builder. He's a culture builder. He's a guy, as you mentioned, he builds a system. And as you also mentioned, most people do not leave Liverpool to go on and have ridiculously successful careers. They wind up literally having their best times inside Jurgen Klopp's system. What I'm going to bring up that's more recency effect here is Jurgen Klopp had every reason to go off the rails last season. Every reason to go completely berserk because of the injuries, because of the depth, because of, things that were being said about him. Yep. He could have, fallen into a hole and not come out. And I'm sure there was a part of him that wanted to. But Jurgen Klopp has already taken to it. He's reignited, himself. He has come in and he has said, we have to address these concerns, whether it's depth, it's the midfield, it's other places. He's got everybody's backing, and Jurgen Klopp is back in the game. We also have to remember, if we're going to go way back into history, Jurgen Klopp is the only person that has beaten Bayern. That's it. That's the end of the sentence.
Oh.
He's the only person that has beaten Bayern.
I thought we had a connection
when he last did it. No, when he did it with Borussia Dortmund back in the day before making his move kind of up the ranks and over to the Premier League. So as a culture builder, I think Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola are two of the best. And Arteta's getting up there. But Jurgen Klopp, in my opinion, basically is just phenomenal because he took a Liverpool...
I agree. We agree.
That he turned a Liverpool around.
So
he really did.
And number 1, we both have Pep Guardiola for the same reasons, but maybe more dominant than more dominant than Pep Guardiola. Than Jurgen Klopp. Guardiola wins 5 Premier League titles in 6 years, changes the culture on the pitch and off the pitch with the academy football being a lot more invested. I do know that Man City were planning that, but having the right philosophy, the style of play, the involvement from the youngsters in the first team, like Foden, Rico Lewis, Cole Palmer, all developing the right way, that is with a man at the helm that knows what to do. That is Pep Guardiola. So I wanted to give credit to that. But Guardiola can be bad in other things. And for Bayern, I have seen comments of like Schweinsteiger, Philipp Lahm saying that he wasn't beneficial in the long term of things for Bayern Munich and the German national team. That can be a controversial take, but he is the best manager in the Premier League, Guardiola, and in the world too. So I wanted to give.
I think the other negative, because obviously yes, Pep Guardiola is my number 1, but the other negative that people throw out there when we tout Pep Guardiola is, well, he's never inherited a side that doesn't have, great or growing infrastructure, that doesn't already have a bevy of world-class players, that doesn't have endless resources for the most part, or a culture of dominance previous to it. Okay, those are fair points, but there is no doubt that Pep Guardiola makes great players world-class and world-class players even more world-class.
Exactly.
Just, case in point, Erling Haaland. Erling Haaland coming in, that could have not necessarily been a disaster, but there was a lot of us that were expecting maybe a little bit of a transition here. No, the guy wins a treble. The guy wins a treble, and he pays attention to detail.
Exactly.
Okay, he made little switches that he doesn't get enough credit for during the season, in terms of whether it's John Stones, whether it's the usage of Ake and Akanji. There's so many different things that he does that he doesn't get credit for. And as you mentioned, a nice little feather in his cap has been the usage of that academy to actually fund or maybe keep it in line with financial fair play over the past few years, because for 27 Premier League minutes, he has unloaded 8 academy players. 8 academy players if Carlos Borges goes to West Ham for over 95 million euros. That doesn't happen anywhere else but maybe Chelsea. If you can show me where it's happened elsewhere, then fine. But that's 27 Premier League minutes that he has gotten almost 100 million for. It basically paid for Jack Grealish in some respects.
That's true.
So Pep Guardiola deserves a whole lot more for that attention to detail. Because what is he going to do? Like,
I completely agree.
You know, he's not going to take over Brentford. He's going to take over the class of the class. So I don't get that that negative about him. So Pep Guardiola, number one.
I agree. The negative about him. What do you mean you don't get the negative about him?
Well, the only negative that pervades everybody saying Pep Guardiola is not the one of the best of all time is that simple thing, and that he only inherits great clubs. They were great before he got there, which I don't ascribe to that, even if there is a grain of truth to it.
That's the people that have never done man management in their life. That's the people that have never done that, that they say that. The attention to detail of this man is unreal, and completely agree with all your points that you expressed. But people, tell us your top 5 in the comments. I'm going to say my top 5. My top 5 of best managers in the Premier League. I have number 5, Unai Emery. I have number 4, Erik ten Hag. 3, Arteta. 2, Klopp. And number 1, Pep Guardiola. It saddens me not to put Eddie Howe and the Zerbi, but watch the YouTube video on YouTube, okay, of best managers top 5. We explain all our reasoning on our top 5 people.
So the last shout out I have before we move on to this is Thomas Frank. Just simply Thomas Frank. Really quickly, you got to say, here's your reminder that Thomas Frank was the only person to win both home and away against Manchester City and Pep Guardiola last season in the Premier League. Thomas Frank.
The Zerbi didn't win.
No, I don't think so. Nope. He won 2. Frank won 2-1 away, and he won 1-0 at home on the final day of the season. Which there might be a little caveat to that, but Thomas Frank has taken a tiny little team from the Championship, and he's brought them up to 9th place, I believe, last season. So he deserves quite a lot more credit, not top 5 credit, but if we're gonna name some people out there, Thomas Frank has got to get some. Oh, and I believe he's been operating Thomas Frank with Brentford. He has been operating with the lowest wage bill in all of the Premier League.
I'd say Mark Silva versus Thomas Frank. Like what?
Yeah, but
like
getting
Palhinha, like that was a Mark Silva choice. So it's
and yet he still finished one rung below.
Exactly.
Fulham finished one below.
They just got promoted.
And Brentford's paying less. Well, Brentford's only been in the league two full seasons.
We both know that Brentford, in terms of the top, they're great management and great decision making. But I'm just saying,
doing it with limited resources is incredibly impressive. And what's even more impressive is Thomas Frank was not hired originally as the head coach. He was promoted from within. He was brought in as an assistant coach after time at Brøndby, and he has worked his way up. I just want, someone with limited resources to get a little more just due than probably what we give. I agree Marco Silva had a great season.
Limited resources too. So I just wanted to say that. And please tell us your top 5 in the comment section. And don't forget to like this video if you're listening until now.